Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to another online Bible study with yours truly, Jonathan D. Miller. I've never said yours truly in a live platform. That's kind of weird. Okay, welcome to the Bible study tonight. When you're watching this in the future, we're going to be talking about Ruth, and Ruth is a really cool book. It's one of my favorites. We're going to talk about why it's one of my favorites, and probably no. If you're wondering if I'm ever going to say one of the books of the Bible isn't my favorite, probably no. Well, let's talk about Leviticus. Not my favorite. That's a hard book to get through. It's like a slog through a marsh. Anyways, we're not talking about Leviticus tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about Ruth. But before we get into it, I'd just like to say a quick prayer for guidance, in general. Prayer is good. God, thank you for bringing us here tonight. Thank you for everybody who's going to tune in live. Thank you for the opportunity to learn from your word. About you, about people, about how you interact with the world and how you love us, and that you're in charge and you're in control, and that you're always with us even when we can't feel you. Help us to learn that from Ruth. Help us to know how good you are, and I pray you just help guide my words tonight as I introduce Ruth. And yeah, you're good, God. We love you. Amen. All right. So, first off, if this is the first time you've ever been to one of my studies, welcome. I'm glad you're here. This is just a really fun thing I like to do, is do an online live Bible study, but it's also meant to be watched later. So if you're watching later, welcome. Leave a comment to let me know. And if you're watching now, welcome. So it's good to have you here. First off, what we do here in the Bible study is we study the Bible. What I have over here is I can split my screen and I can show you the Bible. Right now I'm on the New Living Translation, and I can also show you the New International Translation. I can also show you the English Standard Translation. I can show you all my weird highlights that I can't get rid of. I'm going to try to get rid of those for next study. Just saw them today. But look at all those weird highlights. That's fun. That won't make reading hard at all, but I could do that as well. And so what we do is we read the Bible, we study it, we understand the context, what's going on, because nobody likes to be taken out of the context, so we understand the context, and then we talk about it. And a part of it is, like, if you have a comment about the text, what we're doing, you think I'm wrong, I would love to hear it. You think I'm right, I'd love to hear it. Mostly if you think I'm right, I'm just kidding. Anything, just comment and say hi. Hi, it makes sense. I'm glad to have you here. Glad to have you here at the study. So first off, Ruth. What is Ruth? Why are we studying Ruth? Why does the title say, why is Ruth in the Bible? Why does the thumbnail say, no God in Ruth? Let's answer some of those questions. First off, the last study we did was on Habakkuk. And so if you've been following along with me, Habakkuk is a prophet, and he was writing prophetic literature. And also he was writing it in kind of a poetic style, and that's kind of the genre. And if you've never heard this before, the different books of the Bible have different genres in them. And as a matter of fact, different books might be entirely different genres, but also within the books, that you can find a different genre of text in there as well. For example, in Judges, it's mostly narrative or storytelling, historical writings, genre, the kind of deal in Judges. But in Judges chapter 7, there's the Song of Deborah. I'm not sure if that's correct, but the Song of Deborah, and it's a poem. It's a song. It's a totally different genre. And it's actually considered by scholars, not even Christian scholars, but just by ancient scholars who study ancient texts, as one of the most important and literary creations in all of human history. The Song of Deborah. I don't know if you knew that. It's considered one of the most beautiful genres, written texts that we have in history. It's old and it's cool, as it was written in the Hebrew. All right. All right. That's a little sidetrack. But so Habakkuk is a prophet, and he's writing in poetic, in the poetic genre. You could kind of tell that by the lines, and there's contrast and different things going on. And he's also writing prophetic literature. Ruth is totally different. Her genre is narrative, and a lot of scholars call it a short story. In Habakkuk, we have a conversation between God and Habakkuk. In Ruth, we don't see any of that. There's barely any God mentioned at all. And when I say barely any, I mean, like, he doesn't do it. It doesn't look like he does anything. Like, Ruth is just a everyday, normal, ordinary person on the street, dealing with everyday, normal problems, like everybody dying. And so Ruth, I really love Ruth because unlike a lot of the books in the Bible, nothing supernatural happens at all. Nothing. So it seems. There's no burning bush. There's no parting of of any bodies of water that people aren't walking on water. There's no people being thrown in furnaces and not catching on fire. There's nothing supernatural about Ruth, and yet it's in the Bible, and it's really important because we often get kind of hung up on all the supernatural stuff in the Bible because we think that we all should experience that. Well, like I've said before, the reason it's in the Bible, the reason they wrote it down is because it's out of the ordinary. But Ruth was written down as a short story, and when I say short story, I'm not saying not true, fiction. It's a nonfiction short story, so don't get hung up on that. But it's a short story written to us about an everyday person who's not even an Israelite, who's not even a Hebrew, who's not even the line of Abraham, right? She's a Moabite. And we get these people who don't experience anything supernatural, or so again it seems. And God is mentioned like twice, I think total. We're gonna read it tonight, so we'll find out for sure. Is mentioned twice in prayers, but He never answers verbally. He never answers with anything like stopping the moon or something. It's just an everyday story. And so that's why Ruth is really cool and really different than most of the literature in the Bible. It's a story. When does it happen? This is really important. Let's talk about some context. Over here, chapter 1, the only verse we're going to read is in the days when the judges ruled in Israel. Super important. The Book of Ruth comes right after the Book of Judges. And the Book of Judges tells a historical account of how Israel, starting with Joshua and the leader of Israel, went from following God, kind of, to not following God at all. One of the most pervasive phrases in Judges that's repeated over and over again is everyone just did what was right in their own eyes. That phrase is mentioned over and over in Judges, telling you that the point of Judges, because even the judges are getting really bad near the end, this progression that Israel, who agreed to follow God and to do special things as God's chosen people in Exodus chapter 19. They agreed to it. They agreed to be His chosen people. It shows how they fell away from that and how God kept saving them, but they kept getting worse and worse and worse. And so with that context, Ruth, she appears in that time period. And that's why this is there. Anybody who read this at the time when it was written, anybody who read this in the days when the judges ruled in Israel, anybody who read that would have immediately understood that. And that's kind of the crux of the Old Testament, is they have a lot of context they just assume that you already know. And so that's the little thing we need to keep in mind. This is that Ruth is written in a time when people are pretty much completely abandoning God. And we see that even in Elimelech here, and how he moves to Moab like he's not supposed to. He's an Israelite. He's not supposed to go to Moab. That's not something that God let him do. And look at all this fun highlighting that I don't want there. Yeah. And so that's kind of the context that we need to know. Ruth is a normal, everyday person. There's no supernatural stuff going on in Ruth. God is barely even mentioned at all. And God doesn't seem to do anything in Ruth. And it just shows a story of a person who is suffering. Now, pop quiz. You may not know this. This may be a trick question, but do you know who the main character in Ruth is? It's actually, I would argue it's not Ruth. It's not. And we're going to see that. It's Naomi. And so watch Naomi's journey through this book. And basically what we're going to do is I'm going to read this book from front to back because most books in the Bible were meant to be read in one sitting. They're meant to be read out loud. And so I'm going to read it from front to back, and that's going to be our study for tonight. I've given you the context. I've given you, and we're going to read it together. And then we're going to break it down in the next few weeks. We're going to break it down and see what is the point of Ruth and how it can impact our lives if we understood it. All right, here we go. Let's read Ruth. And I encourage you to read along with me because that's why I put it up there on the screen. All right, here we go. In the days when the judges ruled in Israel. a severe famine came upon the land. And so a man from Bethlehem, does that sound familiar, in Judah, left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. Their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephraimites from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. Ooh, it's repeated. And when they reached Moab, they settled there. Then Elimelech died, and Naomi was left with her 2 sons. The 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpah, and the other woman's name was Ruth. But about 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died. This left Naomi alone, without her 2 sons or her husband. Then Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So Naomi and her daughter-in-law got ready to leave, daughters-in-law, there's 2 of them, ready to leave Moab to return to her homeland. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she set out from the place where she had been living, and they took the road that would lead them back to Judah. But on the way, Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back to your mother's home. And may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to me. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage." And then she kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. "No," they said, "we want to go with you to your people." But Naomi replied, Why should you go on with me? Can I still give birth to other sons who could grow up to be your husbands? No, that doesn't make any sense. No, my daughters, return to your parents' homes, for I am too old to marry again. Even if it were possible, and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry anyone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord himself has raised his fist against me. And again they wept together, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. "Look," Naomi said to her, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same." But Ruth replied, "Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. So the 2 of them continued on their journey. When they came to Bethlehem, the entire town was excited by their arrival. "Is it really Naomi?" the women asked. "Don't call me Naomi," she responded. "Instead, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made life very bitter for me. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has caused me to suffer, and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me?" So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by her daughter-in-law, Ruth, the young Moabite woman. They arrived in Bethlehem in the late spring at the beginning of the barley harvest. Chapter 2. Now, there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband Elimelech. One day, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go out into the harvest field to pick up the stalks of the grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it." Naomi replied, "All right, my daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters, and as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law Elimelech. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he said. "And the Lord bless you," the harvester replied. Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is this young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" And the foreman replied, "She is the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She has been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes' rest in the shelter." Boaz went over and said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us. When you gather grain, don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young woman working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting, and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly, and when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well." Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such kindness?" she asked. "I am only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers." May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." "I hope I continue to please you, sir," she replied. "You have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I am not one of your workers." At mealtime, Boaz called to her, "Come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine." And so she sat with the harvesters, and Boaz gave her some of the roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. And when Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered the young men, "Let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull out some heads of the barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let them pick them up and don't give her a hard time." And so Ruth gathered barley there all day, and when she beat out the grain that evening, it filled an entire basket. And she carried it back into the town and showed it to her mother-in-law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from the meal. "Where did you get all of this grain today?" Naomi asked. "Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you." So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man in whose fields she had worked, and she said, "The man I worked with today is Boaz." "May the Lord bless him," Naomi told her daughter-in-law. "He is showing his kindness to us as well as your dead husband. That man is one of your closest relatives, one of your family redeemers." And then Ruth said, "What's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is complete." "Good," Naomi explained. "Do as he said, my daughter. Stay with the young woman right through the whole harvest. You might be harassed in other fields, but you'll be safe with him." And so Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's field and gathered grain with them until the end of the barley harvest. And then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer. And all the while she lived with her mother-in-law. One day Naomi said to Ruth, "My daughter, it is time that I found a permanent home for you, so that you will be provided for. Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he has been very kind by letting you gather grain with the young women. Tonight he will be winnowing barley as the threshing floor. Now do as I tell you. Take a bath and put on perfume and dress in your nicest clothes. Then go to the threshing floor, but don't let Boaz see you until he has finished eating and drinking. Be sure to notice that where he lies down, and then go and cover his feet and lie down there. He will tell you what to do." "I will do everything you say," Ruth replied. So she went down to the threshing floor that night and followed the instructions of her mother-in-law. After Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he lay down at the far end of the pile of grain and went to sleep. Then Ruth came quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Around midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up and turned over. He was surprised to find a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant Ruth," she replied. "Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer." "The Lord bless you, my daughter," Boaz explained. "You are showing even more family loyalty now than you did before, for you have not gone after a younger man, whether rich or poor. Now don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what is necessary, for everyone in town knows you are a virtuous woman. But while it's true that I am your family redeemers, one of them, there is another man who is more closely related to you than I. Stay here tonight, and in the morning I will talk to him, and if he's willing to redeem you, very well, let him marry you. But if he is not willing, then as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you myself. Now lie down here until morning." So Ruth lay at Boaz's feet until morning, but she got up before it was light enough for people to recognize each other. For Boaz had said, "No one must know that a woman was here at the threshing floor." Then Boaz said to her, "Bring your cloak and spread it out." He measured 6 scoops of barley into the cloak and placed it on her back, and then he returned to the town. When Ruth went back to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "What happened, my daughter?" Ruth told Naomi everything Boaz had done for her, and she added, "He gave me these 6 scoops of barley and said, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law's empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said to her, "Just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he has settled things today." Boaz went to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then the family redeemer he had mentioned came by, so Boaz called out to him, "Come over here and sit down, my friend. I want to talk to you." So they sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses. And Boaz said to the family redeemer, "You know Naomi, who came from Moab. She is selling the land that belonged to her relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about it so that you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want it, let me know right away, because I am the next in line to redeem it after you." The man replied, "All right, I'll redeem it." Then Boaz told him, "Of course your purchase of the land from Naomi also requires that you marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have children who will carry on her husband's name and keep the land in the family." "Then I can't redeem it," the family redeemer replied, "because this might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land. I cannot do it." Now in those days it was the custom in Israel for anyone transferring a right of purchase to remove his sandal and hand it to the other party. This publicly validated the transaction. So the other family redeemer drew off his sandal as he said to Boaz, "You buy the land." Then Boaz said to the elders and to the crowd standing around, "You are witnesses that today I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. And with this land I have acquired Ruth the Moabite woman of Mahlon to be my wife. This way she can have a son to carry on the family name of her dead husband and to inherit the family property here in this hometown. You are all witnesses today." Then the elders and all the people standing in the gates replied, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make this woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, from whom all the nation of Israel descended. May you prosper in Ephrath and be famous in Bethlehem. And may the Lord give you descendants by this young woman who will be like those of our ancestors Perez, the son of Tamar, and Judah." So Boaz took Ruth into his home, and she became his wife. And when he slept with her, the Lord enabled her to become pregnant, and she gave birth to a son. Then the woman in the town said to Naomi, "Praise the Lord, who has now provided a redeemer for your family. May this child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth and care for you in your old age. For he is the son of your daughter-in-law, who loves you and has been better to you than 7 sons." Naomi took the baby and cuddled him to her breast, and she cared for him as if he was her own. The neighbor woman said, "Now at last Naomi has a son again," and they named him Obed. He became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. This is the genealogical record of their ancestors, Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Aminadab. Aminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was the father of David. Whew. We did it. We did it. All right. So that's Ruth. And as we saw, God didn't show up to do anything. He didn't speak to anyone. His name was just used constantly to either be a curse or a blessing. It's very interesting. And we'll leave it at there tonight. There's so much to unpack here, a lot more than you might realize, and see what it might mean for our lives today and how this can be a blessing to us as we realize how God works in human history and in our history. All right, you are loved, and thank you for being a part of this. I hope you have a wonderful day. All right, see you later. Bye. Bye.